Hi, and welcome back to my Guitar Pro tutorials. My name is Ryan. Today I'm going to show you how to create this file and to make your own backing tracks using nothing but Guitar Pro. So you may be comfortable with, and you might have the equipment to actually record yourself playing some chords and maybe even piano, drums, what have you. But if you are a little bit dry on some of that equipment, or you don't know how to use it, or you don't want to deal with it, maybe you just want to do it a different way, Guitar Pro gives you a really cool way to make your own backing tracks. And what's really nice is if you are at all accustomed to playing with backing tracks, let's say on YouTube, you've come to discover that there's a limitation to using somebody else's created backing track. So in this example, let's say you're working on some major 7 arpeggios and you want to just move that across the fretboard a certain way. Well, Guitar Pro allows you to create your own chord progression very quickly and also export this as an MP3. So you don't actually even have to have Guitar Pro open for this to work once you create the file. So let's get into it. We're going to recreate this pretty quickly here. There's also something new we're going to do in this tutorial, and that's create a bass track. And I'm going to show you how to create a simple riff that kind of outlines an arpeggio. I'm going to show you how to create all of these chords, which we've done in previous tutorials, pretty easy. And then we're going to tack on a repeat sign here, and of course that's important because you want your backing track to continue playing. All right, so let's get started with a new file. A couple ways I could do that: go up to File, click on New, or you can click the plus sign in the top right, which currently my video is covering that, so you can't see that, but there's a plus sign you can click on as well. And we're going to go ahead and pick a jazz guitar. This is not going to affect the way anything really looks, just what it sounds like. So I want a little jazz guitar here, and I want the slash notation because I'm going to be really dealing with chords. I don't really care about tab or the rest of it, so we're just going to start with the slash notation and create that first. All right, so looking at our file we want to copy, we're just going to focus on the top slash notation part, of course. It's the guitar part. And we're going to start with a C major 7 chord and some eighth notes. Okay, I'm going to use the shortcut A to open up my chord diagram box. And C major 7, I'm going to create all of these chords manually, although you could theoretically use the naming and type tool, or the tonality and type tool here if you wanted to. But I'm just going to create them manually by clicking on my spots. C major 7, that's what I want, and click OK. All right, my rhythm's defaulting to a quarter note, so we're going to change that using the minus key on my number pad to an eighth note. And then the shortcut C, I'm going to copy that a few times. Let's see, how many do I want? I want 5 eighth notes, and then I want an eighth rest, so we're going to hit the right on the arrow pad. R for rest, it's already an eighth rest, but for some reason you mess up with your keypad here, and it's not an eighth rest, you can use the number, or the plus and minus keys on your number pad to switch between whatever rhythm you want. All right, and then we're going to do just that. We're going to move over and click R again and plus to make it a quarter rest. And now we can start copying and pasting a little bit. So we've got another measure of that. Notice I don't have the chord name over the second measure. That's pretty standard for music. You don't need the chord name if it's the same. So I'm simply going to double click, Control C to copy, right arrow on the keyboard, Control V to paste. Okay, so we've got our first 2 measures. Now we're basically going to do the same thing with these other 2 chords, so I'm going to kind of fly through that. So E flat major 7. And there we go, we've got our first line of music figured out. Looks pretty good. So now I've got a whole nother line, and again I can start copying and pasting quite a bit. You'll notice that the second line of music here, the measures 5 through 8 anyways, is nearly identical. As a matter of fact, it's identical all the way up until there, and then it changes chords. So I'm going to do a special paste here. I'm going to do a Control C for copy on my chart. I'm going to keep moving my arrow key to the right until I get to the next measure, and then I'm going to hit Control Shift V, and that's going to open up the special paste menu. And from here, you can click on this chords toggle switch, and that will also put the labels to the chords, which we want. All right, and then that last beat is a little different. What do we got to do on that last beat? We're going to make that a D flat major 7. All right, so we're going to move the arrow key, A for chord diagram, and we're going to make it D flat major 7. Now, maybe you are familiar with the chromatic scale, maybe you're not, but there's something called an enharmonic equivalent, and it matters here. So you can see I want D flat major 7, but if I keep scrolling, I may or may not ever get to it. All right. So I'm going to go up to the 4th fret. I know that's supposed to be D flat major 7, but you can see it says C sharp, and that's because I need to change it to the flat version of the chord, which in that case is D flat. All right, so we've already got the guitar part done. Now we're going to go back and do the bass track. So this is actually really simple. You could get to another track a couple ways. My favorite way to do it is to open up the bottom track menu here. I believe Guitar Pro calls it the global view, but it's just the tracks. So we're going to click the symbol right here. You could also hit F8 on your keyboard to open and close that same menu. And this is where we can start to add different instruments. So I'm going to click the plus symbol to add a new track. And this is really similar to when we first opened a file. You get the option to make a part, right? So we're going to do bass, and I'll just leave it on electric and click, well, actually, let's see. Yeah, I want this tablature and standard notation. So I'm going to click OK. All right, now if you're copying my file here, you have my file to look at and then your new file to look at, and this won't be an issue for you. But if you're making this for yourself from nothing, it's helpful to see both of these tracks at the same time. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So how you do that is in this track global view, as they call it down here, there's a symbol right here, and you can see both tracks at the same time. Matter of fact, if you have guitar, bass, drums, and flute written in your tracks, you can actually see all 4 parts at the same time. And of course there's an advantage to seeing all of them at the same time, because now I can see what chord I'm on, which is what was important for me, because this is all about arpeggios. I want my bass to match the chord of my guitar part. So real simple here, we're going to make up a very simple bass part here, just this little C major arpeggio. All right, and if you're not familiar with playing bass and you do play guitar, maybe someone's already told you, maybe not, the 4 strings on the bass are also tuned E, A, D, G. So you can think of them as the same as those strings on guitar, your 6th, 5th, 4th, and 3rd strings. Or you can think of the bass as a guitar that's missing the bottom 2 strings, the 1st string and 2nd string. So if that helps you kind of wrap your head around what I'm doing here, good. So we're going to start with 3. All right, then 2, 0. And I'm sure I'll get this in the comments, so I'll mention that the bass is an octave lower. If that wasn't already obvious enough. All right, so we've got our little arpeggio. Now, here's a really cool thing. Other than just copying and pasting, which I am going to do, we can also use a feature called the transpose feature. I know that I'm basically wanting to play this arpeggio over each of these chords. It's the same arpeggio. It's a major chord arpeggio. And Guitar Pro gives you a really cool way to do this that I don't think a lot of people probably use. So what we're going to do here is we're going to Control C for copy, Control V for paste. That one's fine. But for E flat major 7, instead of figuring out what notes I need, I'm just going to paste again. I'll go ahead and do it for the next one too. Paste again. Okay, and then if I hit play, I'm not going to, but if I hit play, this would sound terrible. So we need to transpose this to match the E flat. So again, if you're familiar with the chromatic scale or intervals, this will make a lot of sense to you. C to E flat is 3 half steps higher. Okay, so that's where I'm going to get this number that I'm about to put in here. So I'm going to double click my measure, and we're going to go up to Tools and Transpose. And then in the bottom selector box here, I'm going to do +3. And if you're a fan of intervals, this is a minor third, and then hit OK. Now check this out. This will now match my E flat major chord. If you have a really complicated rhythm in the bass part, this is really nice because now you don't have to replicate that. You don't have to think about what notes to play or anything. Because remember, we're a guitar player. We're just trying to create a backing track, right? We're not trying to create some amazing piece of music for a bass player to play. All right, so there we go. Same thing for the next chord. D is 2 half steps higher than C. So same idea. Go to Tools, Transpose, +2. Major second if you're a fan of intervals. Hit OK. So you remember from the guitar part, we just copied and pasted basically almost the entire second line here. We'll do the same with the bass part here. I'll stop to mention one thing here. You might notice in the bass, if this bothers you, fine. Hopefully you're just doing this to get a backing track. But if this bothers you, I understand. You'll notice in the bass we've got sharp cymbals, and in the guitar chord we earlier said we wanted the flat. So you can go in here and change this to flat pretty easily. Not with the chord chart though. You have to go over to this addition palette by clicking on the symbol in the top left, or you can hit F2 to open and close this panel right here. I'm going to hit F8 to get rid of the bottom panel. All right. And then there's a lot here, but if you look closely, there's a flat sharp symbol right here. And there's a really handy shortcut for this too, Control-Alt-8. But I'll just go ahead and click the symbol, and you can see that that changed it to a flat instead of a sharp. And you'll notice in the tab it stayed the exact same note. So we're dealing with an enharmonic equivalent here. We're not actually changing the note in terms of what it sounds like. And then I can do it over here too. And I'll click that symbol, or you could use the shortcut Control-Alt-8. But you notice in my practice file here, I left them sharps. So I'm going to go ahead and just revert that so it matches. But you could make them flat. It will not change anything the way it sounds. So we'll get rid of this palette, and we'll Control-C to copy almost all of this. Notice I'm leaving off that last beat. And remember to go to the bass tab here, Control-V to paste. I don't need to use a special paste here because there's no chords. If you're a bass player and you play chords, good for you. All right, D flat major 7. We're just going to add one more note here for that. It looks like it's going to be 1st fret. All right, let's tack on a repeat sign there. And the repeat sign is going to apply both tracks here. So I'll just click that. Boom, applies to both tracks. We don't have to go back and forth between them. Control-Enter to spread it out. And we are pretty much done, except for a couple of details here. We want to put our title in there, and then if you want to put your name in there, you could. And then also we want to do a swing 8th note feel. If you've been watching my tutorials, I've shown how to do this many times, but it's really easy. Go to the top, click on this 8th note equals 8th note symbol, triplet 8th note, okay. Well, let's try that again. That didn't work for some reason. Oh, it's because I was in this last measure. Okay, so it's good this happens so you know what to do. So you see I accidentally just put it in this one measure here. So I'm going to hover above that, click that. I'm just going to go ahead and put no triplet feel to get rid of it. And then we'll go back to the beginning. Do the same thing. Hit OK. That's where we want it. So now this will apply to the whole song. All right, so let's go ahead and put a title in there. All right, now you could call it done right here, but if we listen back to this, and this is going to be hard for you to hear if you're not using the same speaker setup I am or whatever, but assuming you're using some decent speakers here, if you play this right now, it will sound kind of muddy. It'll sound like one track is fighting with the other one. So I'm going to very quickly show you something you can do in the global view, which is just the track view. So I'm going to hit F8 on my keyboard. That's going to open up my tracks, and a little recording engineered trick here for you. Since I have 2 tracks, a jazz guitar and a bass guitar here, I'm going to play with the pan control by taking this little knob, and I'm going to go counterclockwise a little bit with the jazz guitar. The number doesn't really matter. It gives you a number here. You can think of it as percent. So I'm going to go 42%, 48% looks like. And then I'm going to do about the same with the bass, except the opposite direction. So it doesn't matter. You could flip-flop these too. You could do counterclockwise on the bass and clockwise on the guitar. It doesn't matter. Just that they're separate is what we're trying to do. So now when we play these back, you will have a clear definition between those 2 instruments, which is kind of nice. Has a little something to it. Okay, let's take a listen. Alright, so since you watched the whole video, I've got a bonus tip for you here. If you're using this as a backing track, you of course want the track to continuously loop so you can practice without having to fiddle with pressing play or stop. So I'm going to show you a really cool feature. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take the repeat sign and tell it to repeat 20 times. And this just needs to be a high number. You don't want to do something stupid like 300 times, but just a high number, let's say the 2 digits. So 20 times, and I'm going to hit OK. Now the reason we did that is because we're going to export this as an MP3. So from here, make sure that you don't have just one measure selected. Make sure your cursor is just on one note somewhere. And then go File, Export, Audio. And you can choose what file type you want here. Of course, MP3 will be a little smaller. I don't need it to sound super amazing, so I'll just leave it MP3. But if you prefer WAV, you could do that too. And I'm going to get rid of the metronome and just leave it on a count in. Is hit this normalization option, and that will bring everything up to a certain level. All right, we're going to hit Export. Major 7 Arpeggio backing track 2 sounds like a very clever name. I'm going to hit Save. And there we've got our backing track MP3. So I'm going to double click on it. We'll see what it sounds like. And there you see, by doing the repeat sign 20 times, I ended up with about 5 minutes of audio. Really cool. All right, good luck.